Good evening. Good evening. This is Reverend Claudia Robley, and I welcome you all this evening to this very special circle. To start us off, I would just like to welcome you all to this very special evening of What Seminary Doesn't Teach You, and the new Interfaith Ministers Network brought to us by Joran Oppelt, who is going to be our moderator for this evening. Before I bring him on, though, what I'd like to do is just to center us with a very short centering prayer. And then I'm going to just go into a little bit of etiquette for this evening. So let's just start with that nice deep breath, bringing ourselves into this space, connecting our heart to this very sacred space that we are all creating here. And with another nice deep breath, centering into our heart space. To become present at this time, in this space. Heavenly Mother, Father, everything, God, we thank you for this opportunity to come together, to share our wisdom, our insights, to support each other on our journeys as ministers. We ask that we be your ears, we be your eyes, that we do what you would have us do and be who you would have us be this evening and at all times. We're very blessed to have this technology that allows us to come together like this, to share and support and be together. And for this, we give thanks. And so it is. Amen.
Amen.
So it is wonderful to have you all here with us this evening. I'm very excited to convene this circle with Joran and the other team members of Wisdom Circle Ministry. And so, Joran, please come on board and say hello.
Yeah, it's a thrill. It's an honor to be here. Hello, everybody, and thanks for calling up and logging in and trying to tackle the technology here that it takes to get connected. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate your time. We all know that you could be doing something else right now. So all of us on the team that planned this call and put together this call are just super appreciative of you being here and being present. This started, just to give you a little backstory, and like Claudia said, my name is Joran Oppelt, and I'm down in St. Petersburg, Florida right now. It's a little bit colder and wetter and windier than it usually is, but I'm in beautiful Florida, and I see we have some people from Australia and elsewhere, which is exciting. I am the minister at Integral Church. It's a church that we formed down here about 3 years ago. And the genesis for this call was I had recently attended and presented at the Parliament of World's Religions, which is where I met Tammy and then in turn met Claudia And we got talking about what a lack there was as far as resources for interfaith ministers. And it was my dream, and it turns out it was their dream as well, to have some kind of resource online that we could tap into as ministers, just as other pastors and other ministers do, to download, whether it's digital assets or sample sermons or videos or graphics for our services that we do, that are applicable in an interfaith setting. So that was the genesis of the call. And then when we all got on the phone together, we thought, well, I bet you there's other people that think the way we do. And so the idea for this monthly call was born. And so that's where you all come in. You all are here, I'm sure, because you are either an interfaith minister, a chaplain, an activist, a seeker, a leader, a facilitator of interfaith dialogue, and somehow involved in that community. We've got a nice group from all over the world, which is fantastic, and it sounds like everybody's interested in learning a combination of things, not only from one another, but also maybe some specific tips on how to listen more compassionately as a chaplain, or how to ramp up and promote and nurture interfaith dialogue in your city, or how to grow a spiritual community in your town based on, the tenets of interfaith and interspirituality and pluralism. And these are all topics that I am also very passionate about. And I hope to unpack all of those in depth on future calls. We sent out a survey. I don't know if you did not receive the survey via email, there's a link to it in the Facebook group. And when we send out the notes from the call, we'll make sure there's a link to the survey in there. We definitely want to hear a little more in detail from everybody about what they want future calls to include and what topics you'd like us to cover, because we definitely want to have it be as inclusive as possible, but also as deep and meaningful and rich and practical and utilitarian as possible, because that ultimately is our goal. This is a call for people who are out in the world actually building communities, growing spiritual communities, growing congregations. Selfishly, I hope to learn some tips and tricks. Our church is only 3 years old. I've got a wonderful board in place. We have interfaith services twice a month, and we do study groups and classes and workshops. We do a couple annual music and art festivals. We got a lot going on in the community. What we don't have is a building. What we don't have is overhead on actual space. And so I'm anxious to hear from people who are maybe, working in communities that are dealing with a whole wide spectrum of conditions, and hopefully we can all learn from each other. The topic for tonight is, and it's exciting to hear so many people from New Seminary, because the topic for tonight is what seminary doesn't teach you, and that's probably what drew you in. That's probably what made you curious. If you are in social webinar and you are looking at the agenda, I did paste in a link to the original article that was posted on collegeandseminary.com that inspired this topic. The name of the original article was The 5 Things That Seminary Doesn't Prepare You For and How to Get Them Covered. So I think what we'll do tonight is I'm just going to list out the 5 things as stated in the article, and we're going to try a little experiment. What we're going to do is vote, and you'll do that by raising your hand either on your keypad, or if you're in social webinar, using the raise hand button in social webinar. And I'll go through the details of that in a minute. But what I'll do is I'll just list these 5 items, these 5 bullet points, as detailed in the article, that seminary does not prepare you for. And that the top 2, top 3, whatever we have time for within the 30 minutes we've set aside for discussion, those are the topics that we'll cover. Number 1 is pastoral counseling. Seminary, according to the article, does not prepare you for clinical pastoral counseling, does not prepare you for members who come to you with a legitimate mental illness and how to appropriately deal with that. That might be that might be staying up to date personally on the education on brain science, and psychology, and psychotherapies, or it might be how and when and the best ways to actually refer that person to an actual therapist. So the number one thing is pastoral counseling and mental illness. Number two, and I'll repeat these, don't feel like you have to write them down. Number two, business and finance. This could be accounting, this could be marketing, outreach, this could be, just acting as the CEO, right? If it was a business, this would be running it as it were a business, right? Balancing the books, keeping the numbers in check, preparing, as Tony Robbins says, he calls it preparing for winter, right? The businesses survive that are prepared for lean times and mean times. So how are we preparing for winter? Business and finance. Number three, leadership, small groups, and volunteers. This one has to do with the social culture within your community, and not just the habits of leadership, great leadership, management, acting as a manager, treating your people well, getting yourself motivated to delegate and get things off your plate and offload it to other people, but also the mechanism that is inspiring others to lead, others to step up and self-select and want to volunteer and become involved in your community, in your congregation, and to lead committees or to start small groups or study groups or recovery programs. How do you get people to step up and become leaders? That's number three. Number four is family. Family could be finding a balance with your work and your life. It could be the time that you're spending with your partner or your spouse. How do you manage and keep those plates spinning? How do you keep all those balls in the air? It could be how do you deal and reconcile the potentially higher or double standard that you have for your own children. For those of us who are parents, and we have kids that go to service with us, how are we explaining that to them? Are we taking the time to explain to our kids why we're going to a mosque and then to a temple and then to a church? How in tune are we with our family and how our activity and our behavior affects our family? And number five is personal accountability. That is our own character, our own spiritual growth. Accountability can be something that we inquire on a few different levels. There could be how are we accountable to ourselves? What methods do I have in place to be accountable to myself? Am I attending some kind of support group? How am I accountable to the community? How am I accountable to my congregation? What checks and balances are there? Maybe there's, concern with optics as detailed in the article. Are you having closed door meetings with members of the opposite sex, and they could be completely innocent, but it just looks bad, and then how am I accountable to the church itself, to the systems, to the structure that is in place? How am I accountable, and how do I fit in? So those five things are the things that we're going to vote on. So number one, pastoral counseling and mental illness. To recap, number two, business and finance. Number three, leadership, small groups, management, volunteers. Number four, family and work-life balance. And number five, personal accountability. So whichever one of those, you can't vote for more than one, you can only pick one. Whichever one of those you want to discuss, hit number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on your keypad, or if you're in the social webinar, you can click the raise hands button, and that'll create a drop down, and then you can select the numbered hand that you'd like to choose. So it's the hands 1 through 5. So raise hands 1 through 5 in social webinar, or press number 1 through 5 on your keypad. And I'll read them again. Number 1, pastoral counseling. Number 2, business and finance. Number 3, leadership. Number 4, family. And number 5, personal accountability. And I'll give you guys some time to vote, and we'll see what the results are. Well, then let's talk about leadership. I've got any number of things that we could go down with that. Anybody dealing with if you're recently installed in a community, right? If you're recently hired on to lead a community, and you all of a sudden you're immersed in this culture that is just alien to you, and you've got to be nice and inclusive to everybody. At the same time, you're navigating the dynamics in the social culture and the cliques and the drama and everything that's happening. How do you stay centered and embody and model habits of a great leader, of a great manager, of a great pastor, of a great minister? How do you lead in that scenario? So does anybody have any ideas on this, any thoughts on this, any experience with leadership, small groups and volunteers? Would anybody like to raise their hand and share? You can raise your hand by pressing the 1. I've got a raised hand from Nell. Let's unmute Nell and see what Nell has to say.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't know if anybody on this call is familiar with nonviolent communication. It is a method of speaking peace, creating peace in our conversations, in our dialogues, in our listening. And it's a way of learning empathy and how to listen to people that we may not agree with, but really hearing what they have to say. And when I was in seminary, I was really struck with the absence of any kind of even mention of the role of an interfaith minister in being a neutral party or a party that can hear multiple perspectives by our titles. In interfaith, we have learned and to value, or we came in valuing different perspectives. And when we're in a group of people, we may be looked to lead people in conversations that are across difference. And so I really think some training for ourselves to embody that role would be very important. And I'm saying my husband and I have been in nonviolent communication trainers before we were in the ministry, and so for us it was particularly absent in the conversations that were held there. And so I'm just wondering if there are others who have encountered in their taking on the interfaith minister role, encountered uncomfortable situations or have been called on to drum up the skill real quickly to be able to mediate or to facilitate conversations across difference.
Thanks, Nell. Yeah, and while we're waiting for someone to respond, in the meantime, is there, you say you had some nonviolent communication training. Is there a website or a specific program that you would recommend for anybody wanting to explore that?
There are lots of resources that I can share. Maybe I can send you an email or something like that you can post. Would that work?
Sure. And it looks like you're in the social webinar, as you can just paste those links in there if you'd like as well.
Okay. Yeah.
But also, you can also email us. That's okay. You can also email us. That'd be fantastic. Yeah. Support at Wisdom Circle Ministries. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that works better.
Thanks, Nell. I can, in the meantime, I can talk a little. Oh, let's go with Marianne. Marianne's got her hand raised, and it might be in response to what Nell was saying. So let's go ahead and unmute Marianne. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Being in the situation that I'm in, because I have a coven of 9 people, it's a small group, and what we usually do is before circle or before we have any kind of spiritual or sacred space or circle or whatever, we discuss among each other what we need to talk about. We have something that bothered you from the last time we saw you, something that you want to say to the rest of us, and we do that with a very open mind and listening. And we usually use a talking stick, which is used in Native American circles, so that it's one at a time, and we discuss, and we use the four assumptions. And never always to speak exactly, always speak clearly of what you want to say, nothing more and nothing less, and that usually would get people to speak what they need to speak about. And I've been using, my coven is now 8 or 9 years old, and been doing this for 45 years, but my coven is much younger than that. And that seems to work with us because it's a small group. Now, volunteers, the way we do it is we have cards at Samhain, which is October 31st for us, and we pick the cards for each of the Sabbaths so that each person participates, because there's no head honcho. There's nothing top down or anything like that, and so the person who does the ritual does the whole ritual, and we participate in that ritual as well. And this seems to work the best. We also have one extra card, which is called a workshop, which we draw, so that someone could have a workshop or something that they would like to discuss. We've had book clubs that way, using a workshop as a book club, or discussing other kinds of things, such as candle magic, or we use on different things, on interrelationships of using the pentacle, all kinds of different topics that we discuss.
So Marianne, I just want to clarify, because, I mean, for me, what I'm dealing with in my community is a sense that people aren't stepping in to lead these small groups or chair a committee or something like that. So are you saying that you're kind of letting Spirit select for the group? You're choosing, you're divining the situation and letting Spirit select the person to lead, say, the book club, for example?
I let the universe decide. And
right.
then
and how do you do that specifically? How do you do that?
Well, when we use the cards, and that helps a lot, because I got Beltane this year, and I'll be well by then, and I'll be able to do my ritual. January 31st is now in bulk, and one of our coveners, Natalie, she will be leading it. Whoever can come. We also do the food. I mean, that's very important to us, witches. We love food.
Sure.
So
sure.
Bring something to the ritual that we eat, that we enjoy, and have a feast beforehand. Do the talking that we need to do while we're feasting. That's another way of divining. And then we go into circle. And the person who has the ritual is responsible for either writing it up or giving us little cards or letting us know what it is. And, it's a basic kind of thing. Yes. Walk
me through the specific mechanism of the cards. Say I was in circle with you, and I drew a card. How would I know that card meant I needed to bring food or lead or read, etc.?
Okay. It would tell you that you are the head of that ritual. Then we sit down, usually after the circle, after we're done, and we ask, what do you want to bring? Who wants to bring what? He will ask, or the person who has the ritual, what do you want to bring? Well, I'll bring the meat. I'll bring the vegetable. I'll bring the starch.
Okay.
Beverage. That's how that's done. And
got it. So the leader of the group is selected by the card, and then they take control at that point and call for volunteers.
That's right.
That's great.
They can
That's great.
Control. Yes, they are in control. This way, no one is above or below anybody else.
Right.
When I began this years ago, I didn't want that, because I did that. I had that once with a Gardnerian coven, and I didn't like it at all. It was just way too authoritarian for me. I mean, if I wanted that, I'd stay in the religion I was born into. Give me a break.
Right. Thank you, Marianne. I think it's interesting that you're doing something that's very, very postmodern, right? Something that's very communitarian, that is peer-to-peer, because, like you said, you don't have a hierarchy, you have a holarchy. You have something that's very inward-facing. My community is very similar, and so I struggle with finding it in me to ask people to volunteer.
That's what you're going to get.
Right. And asking people to lead, say, a series of book discussions or, and then basically what happens is inevitably they get tired of it or burnt out on it, and then it falls back on me, so I end up being the one doing everything, right, leading everything, and that's not sustainable. So, I'm interested to hear methods like this that everybody can learn from and enact in their communities because, we as leaders of interfaith, as leaders of community, we have to be sustainable. It said our energy has to be sustainable. It says in this article that I linked to that what we can keep in mind as a little motto or mantra is to divert daily, to withdraw weekly, and to abandon annually. So if we just have this, written up on our wall, to divert daily, right? That means not keep everything on your plate. The human brain isn't designed to keep numbers and schedules, right? So divert daily, withdraw weekly. That means, honor the Sabbath. That means take one day a week just for you. And then abandon annually, whether that means to do a fast or a cleanse or whether it's take your kids to Disney World, whatever, but abandon your routine annually. So, I'm interested in hearing some other tools. If anybody has some other ideas on how to enact self-selection in your communities, it seems like that's something we definitely struggle with. If a lot of us are leading circles or this inward-facing postmodern structure, which it sounds like we are, I'm really interested in hearing how we deal with something like leadership, which is a structure that is hierarchical. So does anybody else have any ideas or thoughts on this? It looks like Claudia's got her hand raised.
Yes, I do, Joran.
There you go.
I am, as Wisdom Circle Ministries has been growing, we have a pretty large circle of interfaith ministers that are involved. We also have other communities within Wisdom Circle Ministry that we lead outside of the interfaith ministers. My struggle has been, like you, Joran, how to maybe the question is how to touch people in areas where they want to be involved enough to take on the responsibility for leadership. That has been one of the struggles that I see and that I have at times. When I think about the biggest group, of course, that we have is the Interfaith Ministers. And when I think about Interfaith Ministers, I think as we've talked about previously, there is no hierarchy, and that's good as far as I'm concerned. We all have our independent ministries, and from what I know and what I have learned from talking with other interfaith ministers, our ministries are very varied. And we have ministers who are doing really interesting stuff, like their ministry is film, making documentaries, or their ministry is dance, or their ministry is I'm just trying to think of all the different types of ministries that I'm aware of as far as interfaith ministers. It covers a whole gamut. Hospice is another one. And, of course, a lot of chaplains whose congregants, if you want to call them that, are changing all the time. So the question for me is, and I haven't figured out the answer to this yet, and maybe someone can help me. The question for me is how to touch someone in their place so that they get excited enough about a particular topic to want to take a leadership role. And then, of course, how to keep that on a horizontal plane and not put it into a vertical box. So that's, and I don't have the answer. I'm just saying that's my question.
Can you explain a little bit what you mean by horizontal as opposed to vertical when it comes to leadership or when it comes to volunteering?
Sure. When I think about, as we all know, the numbers of people that are disassociating themselves from traditional religions and faith is climbing higher and higher all the time. And so but yet they want that sense of community, as Nell was talking about earlier. They want their spirituality to be acknowledged and celebrated, and they want to celebrate that in a community, okay? And so I see a need for interfaith ministers in that regard, who can lead a community of a lot of people of very many different faiths that they were brought up in, or even different types of spirituality. And so as this grows, I see the need for a network for interfaith ministers, interspiritual ministers growing, but yet I feel very strongly that I don't see what we would call traditional hierarchy in the interfaith structure. Even structure, I have a hard time saying.
Right. We're doing some bad words, aren't we? Yeah.
Right. But so the need is I think is there for that network of interfaith ministers. Mm-hmm. But I know, and I know from talking to other interfaith ministers, that I don't see us moving into a structure like a traditional faith tradition is.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that this is how you're talking about how the Catholic Church was able to proliferate, is because it had a structure. It had a mechanism in place that you could take the sacrament mechanistically, you could recite a few lines, and you could be a Christian, right? As opposed to Gnosticism, which is study with a teacher in a cave and enter contemplative prayer for years, and then maybe someday you could be a Gnostic This is why Catholicism is called the universal church. It's church for everybody, because it had some easy thing that everybody could do to be entered into the circle. And you're talking about a structure, too, with interfaith and pluralism that we've mentioned before. Like spiral dynamics says, this structure, this postmodern structure is very anti-hierarchy. It's very anti-structure. It's very egalitarian, and it holds that everybody's voice is equal, and everybody should have an equal share of voice. And in an environment like that, structure itself is a bad word. Hierarchy is a bad word. And not to mention the irony that postmodernism imposes the hierarchical idea that their model or their version of ranking is better than the other version, which is hierarchy, right? Hierarchy being bad is an idea, is a ranking idea in itself, and so there's a kind of a catch-22 there. I want to get to Deborah. Deborah just joined us. I want her to be able to kind of check in because she joined the call late. And Nell, I know you've got your hand up, and we'll get to you after Deborah talks real briefly. But Deborah, we're talking about leadership and trying to get volunteers and small groups, people to self-select within interfaith communities. And we've just gone around and said our name and kind of where we're from, what we do, and what we're hoping to get out of the call. Are you prepared to share that with us?
Oh, absolutely. Hi, this is Deborah Steen, Reverend Deborah Steen Ross, Dean Deb to many of the people here. I'm sorry I'm so late. I was in not a car accident, but a line of traffic, and I just couldn't get home. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Glad you're here.
Leadership, I guess, is what I've been doing for the last 14, 16 years in running first the New Seminary and now New Vision Interspiritual Seminary. So I just missed the part about something about leadership and about the way, were you talking about holding the energy, holding the container of energy, or were you talking about something else because I just came in a little while ago?
Well, I think we were talking about horizontal versions of leadership as opposed to vertical models of leadership.
And did anybody decide what that was?
Well, Claudia elaborated on that, but I'm sure we'd like to hear your opinion on that. Do you want to speak on it?
I have no idea what you're talking about because if you look at horizontal and vertical, those are only two dimensions in terms of leadership and in terms of holding levels of energy, which is what I do when I teach and when I work with students and ministers. I'm talking about holding dimensional levels of energy, not horizontal and vertical, just horizontal and vertical. So to me, you're talking in a two-dimensional paradigm, and I think that leadership, if you're going to really be working with energetic leadership and not Donald Trump type leadership, and you'll pardon me for using that name.
Your excuse.
You're wanting to. It's really important to go deeper and to go into a place where the energy just flows from you, and it's an energy that you can hold a space for people, for a group, for a group on many levels, not just vertical and horizontal. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
No, that's fine, and I don't think that Claudia was saying that leadership could be reduced to simply horizontal and vertical. I think that we were talking about examples of maybe directives or energies as far as the individual versus the community and that kind of thing. Let's get to Nell. Nell's has had her hand up for a while, so let's see what she has to say.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's an interesting new area to explore. If we're not looking at hierarchical organizations, and we want more egalitarian, more participation on the horizontal. We're getting out of the realm of people who are natural leaders, who are natural extroverts, who are naturally volunteer for things, and making space for people who may have learned through their life that it's not safe to step out, that it's not safe to be a leader, or I'm not worthy of being a leader, or if I am quiet, somebody else will do it, and I can just be a passive observer, or leadership is defined in such a way that doesn't include their way of being. And so I think we have, we can incorporate this in our spiritual development and our spiritual counseling or support for other people to really expand a sense of who they are and what they're here for, and how they can shine their light in ways that is being true to themselves. So I think we have a really fun area to explore and to provide avenues for people who may not have had access to leadership in the past.
I agree. And just hearing you say that, it brought up for me personally the idea that maybe I'm making it look too hard to my community. We meet in the park once a month. We meet in a chapel once a month. We meet down on Beach Drive for our book study. And, I'm always rushing around with a stack of books and a truck full of altars and stones and blankets and cushions and lawn chairs and drums and whatever. I'm always like just schlepping all this stuff around. And, it just occurred to me that maybe somebody looks at me and says, man, that guy's really sweating. Like I am, like you said, I'm passively witnessing what it looks like to lead, and I want no part of it because I'm afraid, as you said, to volunteer my time and my energy because, man, that looks like work. So that was great. Now, thank you. I'm realizing that, like you said, we should bring our own spiritual practice to the experience. I'm realizing that I maybe need to be a little more present and maybe need to slow down a little bit in the moment and just make it look easy so that everybody wants to do it. Does anybody else have any response to what's coming up? Does anybody have any ideas? I see Claudia has her hand raised again. Let's unmute Claudia.
Okay, I just wanted to say one of the things that I have found that does work in terms of supporting leadership and supporting other people who have expressed an interest in something, whatever that may be, is to really listen. I mean, listening, I think, is very, very important, and hearing what it is that does turn people on, what it is that gets them excited. And when we can pinpoint that and confirm that, then start delving into, well, what would it be like for you if you were to lead a group around that subject, whatever that subject might be. So really, supporting and nurturing, I think, are two important aspects of developing volunteers and leadership in a community.
I like that. It reminds me of currently my wife has entered a certification program for a system called the Desire Mapping, which is a book by Danielle Laporte, and a coaching system designed by Danielle Laporte. And it's all based around feeling. It's all based around how you want to feel. And so it encourages you to pursue life decisions, business decisions based on the emotional outcome. Basically, if you want to feel loved, or if you want to feel seen, or even if you want to feel a certain color or abstract words, but it asks you, how do you want to feel? And it asks you to set goals with soul. So I've been enjoying watching her go through this certification program. And it occurred, when in hearing you say that, I wonder if we could just ask somebody if you wanted to step up and lead a group or maybe lead service one day if I'm not around. How would you want that to make you feel, right? Let's ask them how they want to feel and then kind of try to nurture that environment and make that feeling possible for them. Anybody else? Anybody else have any thoughts? Marianne. Marianne has her hand raised.
Hi.
Hi.
I was thinking what Claudia had said, as well as how when we do circle, it's faith itself, the excitement of coming into circle, going to celebrate a Sabbath, that feeling comes in, and I find that with my coven that it simply does that. And when that happens, it seems to circulate all the way around. There seems a cone develops, is what we would call it, would develop, and then there would be some volunteer, there would be some discussion of things during a certain part of the ritual, which we call cakes and ale, which we talk about things like this, and inevitably somebody wants to lead something else or something else besides what we have already in the cards that I had spoke about before. So that does happen. And it's not something that, since we're not authoritarian, we're not God, we're not, although there's God within us and all of that, but we can't make someone feel unless you create the space, and then that space filled with faith and energy compels the soul to speak. And that's what I find and what I've been doing for the past, 2006 to 10 years, the past 10 years and before and beyond. That's what seems to work with me. But, it's different with larger groups. Like I don't have a church and I don't have a congregation and I don't have that. So I don't know if that works the same in a much more intimate way than we do, than we have. So I don't know. I can't speak for somebody else. But that's what I find. That's
great. Yeah, thank you. And it's also, to me, reminiscent, allowing Spirit to lead is reminiscent of, what the Quakers call the sense of the meeting, and allowing the impulse or the idea to arise from silence. Even huge decisions are made by sitting in silence and waiting for the sense of the meeting to arrive in the Quaker tradition. So, yeah, there's something definitely to be said for allowing Spirit to lead a group, no matter how small or large. Anyone else? It's about quarter after, so Claudia, let's unmute Claudia. I'd like to maybe just get a sense from you on whether we want to get into one of these smaller discussions. We could go on all night, I'm sure, or whether we want to kind of go around and get some final thoughts from everybody.
Well, we can certainly go around and get some final thoughts, and then I think that this technology allows us to share what we have collected so far, as far as the Interfaith Ministers Network, and so that they can see what we have and maybe even offer some things up to that. So go ahead and let's do the checkout, and then we'll share that.
Sure. Yeah, I want to remind everybody that this was one topic out of 5 potential topics on one call on a potential string of monthly calls, and we really hope to unpack and get into detail on a lot of these issues, these really utilitarian and practical issues that interfaith ministers are working through in the world. I think there was some really great conversation around the idea of leadership and what it means to be a leader and what it means to encourage leadership in a pluralistic setting. There's definitely more to be said about it for sure. We will definitely let everybody know about the next call and what the topic will be. And like I said, in the meantime, we do have that survey, and we want to hear from you on what potential topics there are for us to cover and what you want to learn about. So we encourage you to do that. But yeah, let's go around and have everybody check out just with maybe what you enjoyed about tonight's call. Let's also say maybe one thing we'd change about the call, and then what we could possibly take away from the call and into our practice or our daily lives. So, Claudia, let's start with you. One thing you liked about the call, one thing you would change about the call, and one thing you'd take away from the call.
Well, let's see. One thing I liked about the call is hearing the different voices and perspectives from other ministers in terms of what they're doing and how they are working with their community. One thing I think I'd like to change about the call, I'll have to think about that one. I can't come up with something right now on that. One thing that I'm going to take away from this and try to practice, and that is holding the space and the energy in a way that maybe I haven't been previously for recognizing and supporting and nurturing that which is exciting for other people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. And actually, Carl has his hand up, so it might be to check out, or it might be to respond to something from the conversation. So, Carl, go ahead.
Actually, it was neither one. I think my hand hit the keyboard. But,
well, you're on.
That's right. Something that I loved was how intentional we were at trying to figure out the language, man. I think the words are really important. So, the discussion on horizontal or vertical, I'm okay with that. I saw there's just one continuum and a bunch of continuums, but I like that we were paying attention to that, because when you're talking to people with really different world views, you got to know whether or not you're really talking about the same thing. So I like that. Something I'd change maybe in the future, if we could decide about what we're going to talk about, so we have some prep ahead of time, or I know one of the questions that we can kind of think about it that might be useful. And the thing that I would take with me would be your comment about working at not making leadership look so hard, because I think, one, it can scare people away, but two, it's always giving us a message, and we could just easily be burning ourselves out by doing that. And I'm really thinking of times where I've done that, so I like that kind of memory of, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be this hard. It's not all about you. Enjoy it. So anyway, that's what I liked.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl. Thanks for being here. Let's go to Tammy. Tammy, one thing you liked, one thing you changed, and what you're taking away.
Oh, well, let's see. One thing I liked was listening to different perspectives. It's easy to get into a rut and live every day the same way. and believe what I believe the same every day, but to be in a space where I'm hearing other perspectives and other views about things shifted me outside of the box. I could feel myself being shifted out of the box as I was listening to people tonight. So I'm grateful for that. What I would change, I'm not sure about that one. I don't know. I guess, like Claudia, I'll have to think about that. I'm sure I will be doing lots of processing after this initial call, but I do look forward to future calls. And a takeaway, gosh, being on the back end of this and as this evening progressed, I'm already processing how to maybe gather the wisdom that was brought forth tonight and to move it forward into future calls. I think that I will be working with the rest of the team of Wisdom Circle Ministries and taking what we've learned tonight and evolving that into future calls. And very grateful for being on tonight. I really enjoyed it. So thank you, Joran.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy. Let's go to Sandra. Sandra, I know that you've been having some connectivity issues and you've been taking notes and doing all kinds of stuff, but we're doing one thing we loved, one thing we'd change about the call, and then what are we taking away from tonight?
One thing that I love is, I've loved about it is everyone's willingness to really get down into the in-between space and into the gap, if you will, and share what's been going on with them and what they feel and believe and have experienced as things are right now, and where they feel they may be going or desire to go, and how this call, being on these calls, can be beneficial to all of us. I don't know necessarily if I would change anything. I liked what Carl had to say about maybe having some prep time for future calls, so maybe that's something we as a team can take into consideration as to how to perhaps create that so that people kind of know a little bit ahead of time what might be talked about. And I think that's it. And I apologize to everyone. Unfortunately, here in this particular part of the world, sometimes the internet is, they upgrade one fine, but tonight was not one of those. So I thank you for bearing with me and apologize for not being able to be here for the full time, but promise you through Spirit I've received everything that needed to be received.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandra. We appreciate you being here, being on the team, and also all those notes you got. We really appreciate you working against the current, as they say. Charles, let's go to you. Let's unmute Charles, if you're ready.
Yes. I enjoyed hearing the different perspectives, and that's basically that part. And I don't think I would change anything. I think it was fine. The thing I liked most was your comment about using emotions as a way to seek out leadership, and I never have given that thought before, and that's something I will be thinking about. And so thank you for this program and for all your great comments.
All right. Thank you, Charles. Thanks for being here tonight. Connie, let's hear from you.
Well, I really enjoyed hearing from everybody and from lots of different points of view. I think my favorite thing was similar to what Charles just said about making decisions based on the feeling, and I've been exploring and I'm working on this year making decisions based on what brings me joy. So that was in alignment with where I'm at right now. I'm not sure where I would change anything at this point. I kind of like that we're all getting to know each other, and so keeping it a fairly open forum that way I think is working well at this point. And what I will take away from this, I'm going to contemplate more on the leadership issue that we were talking about with how do we talk about it, vertical versus horizontal, and in what ways that will work for what I do, because there's certain situations that I like facilitating more of a horizontal, everyone has wisdom to share, and then there's other situations like when I'm teaching yoga that it's got to be more vertical for it to really work. So I'm going to sit with that in terms of how I'm going to cultivate a spiritual community and what's the balance between those two axes.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Connie. Marianne, let's hear from you, if you're ready.
Hi. Yeah, I'm ready. I enjoyed this very much, and I feel like I'm back into community again since I've been sick for so many months, so it really helped me a lot. What I loved was just the community, just getting together and listening to everyone else in their perspectives and their wisdom. And I enjoyed hearing everybody from the new seminary, because I was from the new seminary as well. Hi, Dean Deb. But I'm very happy to be here, and I won't change anything right now because I have to think about it, because it's brand new, and right now we just need to get to know each other, and then we can figure out as we get more comfortable with each other how we would like to change things. We don't know yet. I think it's a little too soon. And what I'm taking away is I need to do a little bit more shadow work. Shadow work in my faith means looking deep inside and discovering more. I've been doing this for years, but there's always more to see. And by listening to others, it sparks off what you need to do for yourself. So that's what I got from it. And I thank you very much for this and for your leadership and your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Thanks for being here. Richard, let's hear from Richard next. Go ahead.
Well, I like the free form of the session, and the fact that everybody felt free to express themselves, and there was a lot to be gained from that. I don't feel comfortable suggesting any changes because it seems to have worked very well as it was. I, though, may have appreciated had you taken a little time to perhaps give your thoughts on what you thought leadership was before everybody else had a chance to express themselves. But I'm not sure that would have helped. And also probably, even though we chose only one out of the five, might have given a little highlight on what you might have had to say on each one of those five topics, but then that would have probably taken too long. So I suspect that it was just fine the way it was. What I'm taking away from the discussion, which was fortunate because I was able to just sit here and listen and reflect without having to say anything, which always works better for me. Can't hear much with my mouth open. And what I got out of the leadership discussion, mostly, whether anybody meant to say it or not, is that the key is to create an environment that causes for creative expression and a willingness to lead on the part of others, which that kind of is consistent with what I want to think anyway. And there's usually another aspect of getting things done though in groups, and that usually has to do with controls. And controls usually calls on a set of management skills, and leadership skills and management skills are two different things. And maybe if that had come up, or maybe that should be another one of the five elements that we're talking about. But I thought it was worthwhile. I don't have any major suggestions, and that's what I got.
Thank you, Richard. And yeah, I hear your suggestion, and I appreciate that. Thank you for the feedback. Actually, we'll be probably reconvening about whether we revisit this topic again for the next call or do a different one. But I know that as far as the agenda, leadership and management was included in the original article. If you click that original link, it does talk about, but the other thing is you don't learn management skills, in seminary. Chaplaincy doesn't prepare you and how to work on group dynamics within an organization. So I think probably all of our leadership experience is going to come from the private sector, right, from the business sector. And so it's interesting to see where those gaps are, where leadership is happening, and what those people kind of do in their spare time or have done in their past lives, as we say. Let's go to Deborah and see. Let's hear from her.
Oh, thank you. I was very interested to listen. I'm sorry I came in late. I was enjoying trying to figure out what it was you were talking about. So all of I have no answers for any of what you're asking at the moment. But next time I will participate more fully. Thank you so much.
Well, that's fair. Thank you, Deb. Thanks for being here. And Nell, let's hear from you. And Rick, Nell and Rick.
I really enjoyed that there was a meaningful topic to talk about and enjoyed people's participation and your facilitation. Don't have any suggestions for changes, and my takeaway is I'm looking forward to the next meeting.
Nice. And for me, I really enjoyed your facilitation, the way you listened deeply to the callers and followed up with wonderful comments and questions. Ditto on the no suggestions for changes other than other stuff that I've heard. And the takeaway is a wonderful feeling of shared community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Nell. Thank you, everybody. I especially want to thank Claudia and Tammy and Sandra, the team that put this thing together and met repeatedly in preparation in order that we may do what we did tonight. There was some behind-the-scenes string pulling, and even now, as Sandra is typing notes and Tammy is busy muting and unmuting, it's like the Wizard of Oz, behind the digital curtain. Just really appreciative of the team in place in order to produce and direct this call. So thank you to Wisdom Circle Ministries for having me and hosting this call. I know that depending where you are in the world, we're definitely running late into the evening hours, and so we're just appreciative of you being here with us and being in community with other ministers and leaders for the purpose of convening and growing community and spreading pluralism and interfaith dialogue throughout the world. I'd like to, just wrap up the call with a closing prayer. So if everybody would just take a deep breath in with me and release, letting it out. We've done some really intense listening tonight through the phone line, connecting with one another. And let's just take a minute to be grateful, to rest in that gratitude for all of us being here in circle and in support of one another. We are grateful for the opportunity to listen, to learn from our friends and from our peers, from our family, from our community. We are grateful for the opportunity to connect around the globe with people of like mind, who share the same heart, the same spirit, the same passions. We are grateful for Spirit in action tonight, acting through us, within us, connecting all of us, and as Spirit in action inevitably does, just unfolding into a new stage, a new cluster, new growth. So grateful for the potential that this new idea could give us and give the world. So grateful to Spirit. And I'll close with the integral dedication from my tradition, which is, may my consciousness and my behavior be of benefit to all beings in all worlds, liberating all into the one taste of this and every moment. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joran.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Be well.